Welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to Bookmas, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in October and November, even though it's December. I actually ended up reading a little bit less than normally, or a little bit less than I wanted to do in both of those months, because I did start my job in October and I just got busy and I didn't read as much, so I didn't want to do a wrap up for just like 3 books, so that's why I'm doing them combined. But I also have a coffee here. This is one of my favorite places. I love Soul Good, and I ended up getting a hot caramel latte, and I always do iced, but it's so cold, and my boyfriend has been begging me to get a hot one because he loves them, and I am just such an iced drink girly to my core. Like, I will drink an iced drink even if it's freezing. It's fine, but I still prefer iced. But anyways, I ended up reading 7 books in these 2 months. Let me go over the statistics for you guys before we get into the wrap up. So I ended up reading 2 literary fiction books. I read 1 historical fiction, I read 2 fantasy, and I read 1 YA mystery thriller, and then 1 adult mystery thriller. I feel like I had a very good variety of genres. I usually do mix it around because I get a little bit bored if I stick with one genre for too long. So I'm excited to talk about these books. Let's get started. To start off the month, I had a pretty rough start to October with The Woman by Kristen Hanna. I love Kristen Hanna. If you're new to this channel, I love Kristen Hanna. I feel like I talk about it a lot. I've read 4 other books of hers and all of them have been 4 stars and above. Like, she is incredible. I think I've read 3 other books, actually this is the 4th, and all of her books are historical fiction, but she does such a good job at making it so readable. Like, for people who don't love historical fiction or are trying to get into that genre, she is the perfect place to start. And I love her books. I love the way she creates characters, creates worlds. She makes it feel like you're in the world, which is amazing. But this book, on the other hand, I'm still very conflicted on it. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars, which is the lowest I've ever given a Kristen Hanna book. But hear me out. This book is about a woman named Frankie, and she ends up signing up to be a nurse in the Vietnam War right after she graduated. So she is like 21 years old, has no other experience, and she decides to be a nurse in the Vietnam War because her brother's going there and she wants to be with him. And it definitely is intense, and she is very descriptive with the way that she creates this world and this war. And like I said, she creates very immersive worlds that you feel like you're in, and when it's a scary, traumatizing world, sometimes it's not fun to be immersed in that. Although her book was informative, and you can tell she did the research necessary to really put you in that world, and I was learning so many different terms and things that happened during the Vietnam War, which was interesting. It was just a lot of trauma back to back to back. The timing in this book was also a little bit weird. For example, when she decided to go to Vietnam War, it was a year-long contract, so that year is finished, like not even halfway through the book. So then you're like, what's gonna happen the rest of this book? And I understand it follows Frankie's life basically, so it follows like past that a long time. It follows basically the entire Vietnam War, which is quite a few years. I feel like I had a few issues with this book, and I don't know if I'm articulating it well, but one of them was definitely the fact that it just felt like trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma. Like, the entire book, it just feels like, what's the worst thing that could happen, and then it'll happen. And that can be kind of exhausting to read about, and definitely exhausting for the characters. Like, they never get a break, and it's a lot. And I feel like it is realistic to the time period, so you're getting what you want from this book. Like, you are getting a realistic Vietnam War book. I just think I wasn't in the headspace to truly enjoy that, so that kind of was difficult for me personally to be reading. And then also, I feel like Kristen Hanna in this book specifically did a lot of telling and not showing. For example, there are some beautiful friendships that grow from this book, and you get a lot of that, but I feel like they kind of just tell you about how good of friends these people are, but then you never really got the story of like, okay, how did they become friends? So it felt a little bit unrealistic, because I feel like there was so much focus on all the trauma going on and so much detail provided into that. I would have loved if there was more detail into the friendships. I do think one of the topics of it that was very important was about the women who were underrepresented during the Vietnam War, because women were there. I was absolutely shocked at how many people denied the women's existence in the Vietnam War, and she portrayed that so well in this book. So I'm very conflicted on it, because at the end of the day, Kristen Hanna is a beautiful writer, and I loved the writing in this, and she creates these amazing worlds. She really puts you in there. I think personally this was just not a space that I wanted to be in, because it was very traumatic and difficult to read about, and it was constantly like there was really no break, so you're kind of just left feeling like what is going to happen next, and it's kind of like an anxiety inducing almost read because you're just like constantly at the edge of your seat, like what is going to happen, but not in like a mystery thriller way, in like a what's going to break my heart next. And I feel like I completely shut down my emotions while reading this because I'm a crier, and I didn't even cry. That's how you know it was a lot. That's why I gave this book 3.5 stars, because I feel like I can't discredit the fact that it was an amazing book and Kristen Hanna does an amazing job. I just don't think it was for me at that time period. I don't feel like I want to reread it or put myself through it again. I'm conflicted on recommending it to people. If you feel like you can handle a very intense read, then read it. If you're interested in the Vietnam War, of course, read it. That was my first book. I started out October pretty rough, and it like almost put me in a book slump. So I had to go to something very easy. So the next book that I read, I actually do not have with me, is The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden. Like I said, I had to go to something very easy next. I went to a very easy mystery thriller, and I was super excited for this book, like looking forward to it months before the release. And I've only read one Frida McFadden book before, The Housemaid. I enjoyed it. I didn't think it was like the best book I've ever read, but it was fun. So that's kind of what I was expecting with this book. I ended up giving it 2 stars. I think it just was not what I was wanting or expecting, but basically it's about a girl who is dating this new guy, and she's had a horrible dating history, and she's like, this guy is perfect, like what is wrong with him, he's so amazing. And then it comes out that there's a serial killer who dates his victims before he kills them, and she's like, oh my gosh, what if I'm dating this serial killer? I have to say, I hated these characters so much. Like, I've never despised characters more. I didn't enjoy reading about them. I didn't like them. The only reason I continued was because I wanted to get this twist and I wanted to figure out what happened, and I have to say the twist was like disappointing to me. I think it's because I went in with expectations of what I wanted this book to be, and it just was not that. But it felt dumb. The characters were so dumb, specifically the main character. The twist was like, okay, that's annoying. I feel like I'm hating on this book so much. I gave it 2 stars. I just didn't enjoy it. For me, it just felt like undeveloped. That's what I think disappointed me so much, was because the idea was so strong that I was so excited for it, and I just feel like the execution was poorly done. I don't know. It just was not for me. So 2 stars for The Boyfriend. Very disappointed. Was very excited for this book too. And after that, I was low-key like, I don't want to read anymore. But I also at the same time was like, I need a good experience because that was so disappointing. So then my friend talked me into reading Fourth Wing. I do have a reading vlog for this one. I also have a reading vlog for The Woman posted, but I didn't do one for The Boyfriend, so I don't have that. But this one, if you want more in-depth thoughts, I do have a reading vlog posted. I ended up giving Fourth Wing 4 stars. I loved this book. I completely ate it up. It was so fun. To me, this book felt a lot like a combination of How to Train Your Dragon and Divergent, and I love both of those things, so I was very excited to be reading it. It was very fun. Edge of your seat, like, went by so fast, and it is a kind of long book, but it went by really, really fast because it is just so enjoyable. I loved the dragons. They were my favorite part of this book. They were the part that kept me going. Like, I fell in love with one of the dragons. They are my child, my everything, and I attribute it to my cat. And if I attribute anything to my cat, like, I love it. So that's how I felt about one of these dragons. In terms of characters, I enjoyed the main character. She wasn't like my favorite main character I've ever read about. And there are 2 kind of love interests because this is a romantasy. I did not enjoy one of the love interests like at all. You can tell who she's gonna pick right away. And sometimes I don't enjoy that if there's gonna be another person. Sometimes I kind of want, like, who is it gonna be? I like having the choice there, and it felt very obvious from the second that you meet this character that that's gonna be the love interest. It's not my favorite thing, but it's fine. The book in and of itself was super fun. There were a lot of like challenges and trials that they had to get through, and a lot of fun side characters that you get to know. The end of the book was intense. I think I even teared up at something that happened. The end of the book was fun to read. You're locked in, and the twist was pretty crazy. Like, the stuff that, it wasn't really a twist, but the stuff that you uncover when you keep reading was pretty crazy. It was just a fun fantasy book. I would recommend this for people who are wanting to start the series. If you love How to Train Your Dragon, if you love Divergent, if you think dragons are cute, because they were so cute. And I jumped right into the second book, which is the next book that I read. And I don't do that in series because I get bored sometimes, especially if they're long books, and then I'll just like the book more. So I tend to wait between reading series because I'm just scared that I'm not gonna like it. But I ended up reading the next book, Iron Flame. I don't have that one yet because it's only a hardcover, but I ended up giving that one 3 stars. So unfortunately, I did not love this one as much. I think that book one did an okay job with world building, but there also wasn't too much of a world to build up in book one. But then in book two, suddenly there's so much more world, and there was like no building of this world. I feel like if she would have done a little bit more world building in book one, you would have transitioned to book two better, but she didn't really do that. So book two, I was a little bit lost for some of it because they're introducing all these new worlds, all these new people. What's going on? I'm just used to this one world and these set of people. I heard a lot of people saying that book two was not as good before I started it. I also heard people saying that they felt like it was rushed. I could see that. I didn't enjoy it as much. It was still fun though. It just felt longer. It definitely was longer, and it wasn't like longer in the sense that it goes by so fast it doesn't even feel long, because it went by kind of slow for me. There were a few lulls, but then there were intense parts, and I love the intense parts because that's what has me flipping through the pages. But the lulls, I'm like, I'm bored, I could pick up a different book right now, and I did feel that a few times in this book. I will say one of my favorite things about the first book were the dragons, and one of my favorite dragons was hardly even in the second book. So I was like, that's annoying, because I'm reading this book because I want to see this dragon. I miss this dragon, and they're kind of like, the personalities changed, they're not the same, and they're hardly in that book, and that was very disappointing for me. That's aside from the point. The book itself felt a little bit messy, a little bit rushed. The ending was still intense. The ending had me at the edge of my seat, and I did want to keep reading. The way it ended though was a little bit poorly done in my opinion, because it was so ambiguous, so vague. Like, you kind of get the idea of what happened, but they don't necessarily say it. I didn't love how it ended, but that's just me. I also don't fully understand how that happened. The romance also was so annoying in this book. I'm sorry, like, I was so sick of these characters. I didn't even want to keep reading it because they kept fighting over the same thing over and over and over. It was like lack of communication, miscommunication, the worst communication you've ever seen. Also in book one, I forgot to say, the main love interest, the end, he does something insane. Like, the thing that came out that he does at the end of the book, why are people romanticizing this guy? That is absolutely horrific, and if anyone did that to me, bye. So unfortunately that was how I felt during this book. Did not love it because the main character was annoying me, the main love interest was annoying me, and the plot was just not, or the world building was just not done super well. But aside from that, it was still a fun fantasy book, because I mean, like, you still have the fun adventures that you're going on, and it is fun to read about that. So I ended up giving it 3 stars, and the third one comes out next month, so I am excited. I'm going to read it. I'm hopeful because she took more time writing this one, so if it is anything like the first one, I'm sure I'm going to enjoy it. So those are my thoughts on just the Fourth Wing series in general. I feel like it was kind of combined because I read them both back to back, and it's kind of hard for me to separate book one and book two because I read them back to back. I'm like, I kind of forgot how book one ended and how book two started. Now I need a coffee break. One of my cats is sleeping right here, and the other cat is sleeping on the floor. That one's Lance, my old man. He is a 14-year-old boy, and he is old man, but he has the energy of a kitten. Oops, and that's my computer with my Goodreads on it. I didn't realize that was in the shot this entire time. I apologize. And then I have my other little kitten, Maisie. I call her a kitten. She's 2 years old though. She's my little baby though. Those are my cats. They're both orange, so it's hard to differentiate between them if you don't know them, but Maisie has a white mouth and she's like fluffier. Anyways, back to my wrap up. I feel like I'm rambling. We only have 3 more books. I'm getting through them. So the next book that I picked up was Good Girl Bad Blood, the second book in the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, which I'm truly so obsessed with. I love this series. It reminds me why I love reading so much, because it is so fun and it goes so fast. If you haven't read it yet, please pick it up. I feel like I'm a little bit late to this party because it did kind of blow up in 2020. Like, people loved it, but I am obsessed with it, and now I understand, and I want to read all of Holly Jackson's books because if they're all like this, I'm just having so much fun. I'm having a ball. So this series follows Pip. She's a high schooler, and the first book was about her investigating 2 murders that happened at her school years ago of Sal and Andy, and then this one is about one of her best friend's brothers who goes missing, and this one is actually like, he has not died yet, he is alive, but I'm not spoiling anything. That is just like their mindset. They think he hasn't died yet, he's still alive. So this one's more like intense because they feel like they're timed now, like they have to find him before anything happens to him. But basically one of her best friend's older brothers, Jamie, goes missing, and they ask her to investigate it. And this one was very interesting to me. I love Catfish. I love that show so much, and this one kind of had vibes of like Catfish. I also love podcasts and books because they're so fun to listen to, and it was the same thing with the last book. I loved listening to it because they do different voices when they interview people, and it's very fun. It's very much like a whodunit, and you get to interview all these different people. You get a ton of clues. My favorite things about her book specifically is that all the clues tied together at the end, and they all make sense. Whereas other mystery thrillers, sometimes you're left with a lot of open-ended questions. You're confused. You don't know what all of these different things meant. But hers all tie together with a pretty bow at the end. You're like, this makes sense. And they're also not simple mysteries. They are very complex. She adds a lot of different things to them. And the twists at the end always end up being kind of weird. That's one of the things about these books that I don't love, to be honest. And one of the reasons they're not 5 stars is I'm not the biggest fan of the twist. I feel like they're a little bit outlandish. I understand the books are supposed to be fun, but this twist was very outlandish. Like, it was so what? So that's one of the reasons I ended up giving it 4 stars, because the book is so fun. I love the way it's written. I love the way that she includes, like, she'll include a Reddit post and you get to read exactly what someone's saying, or she'll include text messages, she'll include documents, so you feel like you're analyzing the data too, which makes it so much more fun and so much more like you're integrated into the story. I love the way she writes. It's so entertaining, and I love the characters too because they're very detailed, and I think that's the benefit of a series because we already have one book describing these characters, so you already feel like you know them. But I had so much fun reading it, and I'm already ready to pick up the 3rd book. The next book that I read was Britt Marie Was Here, and I gave this book 5 stars. I love this book so much. This book is by Frederick Backman. I love Frederick Backman. I feel like his writing is just so beautiful. I don't know how to describe it, but it just touches my heart in a way that no one else has. Everything he writes just makes me very deeply emotional. It makes me think, it makes me feel things, and I love when books do that. If a book can make me feel things, 5 stars. Like, if you make me cry, I love you, because I love feeling emotions when reading. I feel like that is the best part about connecting you to a book and just really loving the characters, and I love the characters so much because one of the best things that Frederick Backman does is he really knows how to create deeply developed characters that have their own backstories, their own lives, their own perspectives, and you see it in everything that they do. Like, everything that they do feels so intentional and so right for that character, and I love the way that he does that. Nothing feels wrong. Like, it really feels like all these different voices instead of one voice creating these. Like, these were real people, and I love the way he does that. Britt Marie Was Here is about an older woman named Britt Marie. She is 60 years old. She finds out that her husband has been being unfaithful. Stop. This is like, I'm so unwell. This is the cutest thing ever. Can we take a second for my cats, please? That's Maisie licking Lance. That is just my favorite thing ever because Lance is like a cranky old man, but he lets Maisie, okay, see, there they go. But he would let Maisie do those things and like cuddle him because she is so affectionate. So she loves to be touching people or another cat, and she loves to lick other cats. She will try and cuddle him, and like she will really test his boundaries, but then I think he just kind of lets her do it now. So that was very cute. That made my day. But anyway, this book is about Britt Marie. She is a 60-year-old woman, and she finds out that her husband is being unfaithful, and now she's alone. She's kind of lived her whole life for him and doing things for him and his kids, so she doesn't really know who she is on her own and what she likes to do on her own. She also struggles with OCD, and I don't think that's specifically stated, but I do think it's implied. So you see the way that that impacts her and the way that she's very particular about certain things in her life, and so she tries to get a job to do something with her life because one thing that's very important to her is knowing that people know her and that like she won't die on a floor and no one will know she's gone. So she ends up getting a job in this little nowhere town called Borg, and the people there, I love them so much. Britt Marie herself is such a character. Everything she does is so funny, but so her. And one of my favorite things about her is if someone is annoying her, she'll just say, huh? And then leave. Like, she just laughs and leaves. Very iconic of her. But it's just a happy, hopeful book about her rediscovering love for life and connections and kind of figuring out who she is on her own. And all of the characters are amazing. Like, you truly fall in love with all of them, and they all have their own flaws, and you see that. Frederick Backman portrays that so beautifully, portrays the fact that people are flawed but still lovable and have their reasons for why they do what they do. And you really get a backstory on every single character in this book. Like, none of them feel like side characters. They all feel like intentionally placed characters that have stories and a reason for being here and a reason for doing what they're doing. He also writes a lot about kids and their experiences with their families and the difficulties that they deal with. He did that in both Beartown and this book. And this book also heavily focuses on soccer and the impact that a sport and a shared sport can have on people and how it can bring people together. There's also a character in this book named Somebody. Like, that is all they refer to this person as. I think that character is so funny. Like, there was a point where I was legitimately just giggling because what they said was so funny to me. I love this book. I love this world. The end of it, Britt Marie is kind of left with a bunch of different choices. There was one part where I actually legitimately cried, and then I cried telling my boyfriend what happened because it was so heartwarming, so sweet. The ending is left a little bit ambiguous. You don't know what happened, but sometimes I do enjoy that in literary fiction books because I like when it's left open and you can kind of interpret how you think it went based on what you know about this character and you know about their life. I also love that you got a lot of Britt Marie's backstory, so you kind of saw how the OCD tendencies came to be, and you see how she lives with them. You see how they impact her day day to day. I feel like he did a really good job showing OCD and showing that it's not just wanting a place clean, although she is like that, but it's a bunch of other things as well. I recommend this book to literally everyone. I recommend anything Frederick Backman to everyone. I will say this character, Britt Marie, is featured in another one of his books, My Grandmother Told You to Tell You She's Sorry, I think is what it's called. And Britt Marie and her husband are featured in this book, and they're still together. So if you want more on their dynamic, I think you should read that book first, because this one comes after it. I didn't do that though, and I think it's still fine. Like, I'm gonna go back and read that book eventually, and I don't think it will truly impact it. I don't think it's too much about Britt Marie. I just think she is featured in there, so some people say to read that book first. Now we are on to my last book. So this book I read most recently. I finished this book last week, I think, and that is Piranesi. I was very intrigued by this book. I had wanted to read it for a little while, but this book was nothing like I was anticipating it to be. I truly had no idea what this book would be about based on the way it was described. On the back, it's like a very vague description, but basically there is a man named Piranesi, and he lived in this world. It's like endless corridors, endless vestibules for him to explore, and there's an ocean in there, and the ocean will flood different floors. But Piranesi's not afraid. He has spent forever studying this place. He understands the way of the water. He understands everything. And twice every week, a man called the Other, who's the only other person there, which is why he's called the Other, visits him, and they kind of discuss their research about these halls. The Other is having Piranesi research all these halls and figure things out. I'm so zoned out right now because of my cats. And then Piranesi begins to do a little bit more research, and the stuff that he is uncovering is truly life-shattering for him and very crazy. It is not what I expected. It's not like a mythological book. The cover kind of gives the vibe that it's like that, but I would say it's more of like a psychological thriller, but it's not too much of a thriller, but just very psychological, makes you think, messes with your mind because you don't know what's true, you don't know what's going on. Piranesi doesn't know what's true, and you're getting it from his perspective, which is interesting because you're seeing the way that he's thinking. It was a very interesting book. It kind of gave me Truman Show vibes. I really did enjoy the twist. I will say the first half of the book was a little bit boring in my opinion, because it was very much descriptions of the world that he lives in and kind of talking about how Piranesi survives, and it's very directionally focused, and I'm such a directionally challenged person, so I was like getting lost. And I will say the second half of the book is where things really picked up. I was very interested. I wanted to know what happened, and I kept going and going and going. I do think the twist was very good. It was very exciting. It was worth the wait, so I definitely think you should keep reading, although the first half of this book was pretty hard to get through and I kind of wanted to DNF it. I was very bored, but the twist is worth the wait, and it was well developed, and it was so interesting, and I did really love it. I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars just because the beginning was a little bit boring, but the end of it was very good and entertaining, so highly recommend reading it for that. So those were the 7 books that I ended up reading in October and November. Let me know what books you ended up reading in those months, or any books that you're reading now. If you've read any of these, let me know your thoughts. Just kind of anything, comment it down below. And thank you guys so much for being here, for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will hopefully see you in the next Bookmas video tomorrow. Bye!